Mr. Wells.
Mr. Sanderson.
Lukewarm, how are you?
Ice cold, I am doing relatively well.
I'm not quite as ice cold because they offered to refill my cup and it had been sitting here for a while, and I just said, I'll drink it.
You're going to drink slightly cold water.
Slightly
instead
chilled
of
water.
Icy water.
I mean, there's still a little bit of ice in it. So it is technically still ice cold, but yeah.
Nice. At least part of the water is ice cold.
So I was at a writing retreat last week.
You were?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I knew that already. I'm just trying to play along. Like, ooh.
It was not very fun. It was
just nose to the grindstone the whole time?
Nose to the grindstone. I had to do 4 times my normal average work rate a day. And so it was get up and work for 16 hours and go to bed.
4 times your normal average work rate. Feels like you may have lit a keyboard on fire.
See, here's the thing. I am not fast day by day. I am fast consistency-wise. That's the secret of my success. So my normal speed is not faster than, it's not blazing fast. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
It's really slow and steady wins the race. And I couldn't do this if I was writing new material, but revisions are, as our friend Howard always puts it, chop wood, carry water. It's going line by line and making each line a little tighter for this draft. This was the polishing draft. And so that I really can do 16 hours a day if I have to. And I needed to be on time. So
wow. I hope that you at least got to eat some tasty food in between.
No.
Oh.
Becky comes up and stocks it with cold cuts and frozen dinners. And I just sit in the cabin and eat frozen dinners and cold cuts. I do get to have peanuts because my son, who's here changing papers for us today, is allergic to them. So
So you don't have them in the house at all?
We don't have them in the house. And I really like salted in the shell peanuts. But I only have them when I go away from the house. So that is a little treat.
Okay. That's fun. That reminds me of when we were kids, my mom hates the smell of Japanese curry.
Okay.
Just cannot stand it. My dad made it for her when she was pregnant with me, and she was very morning sick, and since then she can't. She also has multiple sclerosis. And so every time she would end up in the hospital, which wasn't often, but it was several times during my childhood, we would say, "Oh no, that's so sad. Can we have curry tonight?" And we were so excited because it's like, yay!
I was not when I moved to Korea. I wasn't aware of the difference between the curries, right? Like as a child in Lincoln, Nebraska, we didn't have access as easily to the various curries, shall we say. It was during college that I really got into both Thai curry and Indian curry. But I had never had Japanese curry until I went to Korea. And they're like, we're having curry. I'm like, I love curry. And it is a very different flavor.
And then they give you this basically like meat
Gravy.
and potatoes stew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it has a hint of curry flavoring to it. It does have, but it's interesting. Koreans love spicy hot, but they don't love like Indian spicy or Mexican spicy. Like different varieties of spicy bother them. I assume it's it's uncanny valley sort of thing. Like you're Korean, they can eat anything heat wise, but they just don't generally like them.
The flavor of it doesn't work for them.
And so I was like, you have curry, but then it's very different and it's Japanese style. I'm sure that the Koreans, having lived in Korea for the 2 years I was, and getting told the same variation on the same story. Did you know that was actually Korean? Like when I first had, gyoza, which we call mandu, they'd be like, these are actually Korean. These are not Chinese or Japanese. And ramen, did you know ramen is actually Korean? I'm like, I think that instant noodles were invented by a Japanese man. I think you can point to that. Like they'd be like, but he got it from a Korean. And I could never tell if they were, yanking my chain, or if they seriously believed that all of these things, because, they love stories like this. Like I had one very seriously tell me, and again, he could have been playing a prank on the American, right? Where he's like, did you know that the Japanese emperor is actually Korean? And it's like, during this time, this thing happened, and it was a Korean who went over, and the Japanese emperor is actually Korean. And so, one tried to tell me that the word samurai was a Korean word.
It was a Korean word.
Borrowed from the Japanese. So
it's like Korea is the Texas of Asia. Everything good comes from them. We're endlessly proud of ourselves. I love it, though.
It was really fun. I'm pretty sure that the Japanese, the samurai one, it was a joke that they all said because it was a pun, and I just wasn't good enough at the language to understand why that was a pun, that it was originally Korean. So.
Do you want to hear my one Japanese pun that I know?
Yeah.
So in Japanese, they're the ordinal numbers, first, second, third, etc. There's many different endings based on the shape of the thing you're counting.
Yes, same in Korea.
Same in Korea?
Yeah, but in Korea, not as many. So in Korea, they'll only use 2. They use either the Chinese or the Korean. And in Japan, it's like...
I understand that there's many. I do not speak Japanese. But this is the joke that my dad told me that he used to play on, tell to the little kids. Because when you're counting, the first 2 numbers are ichi and ni. But when you are counting cylindrical objects, it's ihon and nihon.
Yes.
And so he would always, find the little Japanese kids and tell them that, I'm Nihonjin, which means I'm Japanese. And then they wouldn't believe him. And then he'd count his legs. Ihon, nihon. So that's my pun that I know in Japanese.
That's pretty good. Puns work really well in particularly in Korea, but in Japan also, because you have a lot of the linguistics is based off of Chinese characters. For years and years and years, if you were going to write Korean, you'd write it with Chinese characters. And they're logographic. They have a meaning. So you can write any language in Chinese. You can write English in Chinese. You can't pronounce it, but you can, you can... The picture of a person is a picture of a person, regardless of what language.
Yeah.
So if you can write Chinese in the old days, you could communicate with anyone who also wrote Chinese, even if your languages were completely different. Cool. Right? Where it's not just like here. If you can write, if you wrote Korean using Roman language or using our numerals, Arabic numerals, not Arabic numerals, Greek alphabet. Like the Greek Roman alphabet. You could write it out, and you would read it, and you wouldn't understand what it means because you could write it phonetically, right? But it's the opposite there. You can write it, and you won't know it phonetically, but you'll know the meaning.
Interesting.
Right? It makes perfect sense because it's logographic. But because of that, most Korean words have a Chinese root, which means that you write it in Korean, and Korean is phonetic. So if you write mandu, you in Korean write an M, an A, an N, a D, and a U, right? But you can also write the pictures, mandu, that you can read in your own language that all mean mandu. And so what I'm getting at is homophones are hilarious in Korean because there's, 30 different characters that mean man. And you can write in Korean mandu and then make a pun where it's the other Chinese character.
Okay.
To give you an example, I'm sure this is confusing some people, but I'm using mandu because it was the most famous one. Mandu, I'm not sure what it means. It's gyoza. It probably means some sort of dumpling, right? Do is probably dumpling. And, man is probably the way you make it. But man also means barbarian, and do means head. And so someone told me a long story about the invention of mandu, about how they fought all the barbarians when Chinggis Khan came through, and the heads filled up a river, and they were able to walk across them. And the punchline is, and that's where we get mandu. And I was just like, huh? And the Korean next to me just busted a gut because different Chinese characters for mandu. Homophones are hilarious over there.
So were you able to successfully tell puns, use pun humor when you lived there?
By the end, I could do really bad ones. Like so bad that like over here there's like you can have a certain finesse with how bad your pun is.
Mm-hmm.
Over there, I couldn't. It was just like the worst level of pun. And I think I've told you before, the joke in Korea for dad joke was cold joke. And
Okay.
if you had a bad pun, they called it a cold joke.
And how do you say that?
So long? Yeah, so long.
Okay.
So long hada. And so the teens and that we would sometimes be hanging out with in one region in particular, they loved calling things so long jokes, and they came up with hand gestures. Have I done this before?
No.
To indicate if a joke was really bad. And it was always a joke about a penguin because it's so cold. And so I once did one of these really bad, and a Korean, for those not listening, I'm taking up my 4 fingers on one hand, for those who are listening rather than watching, and I have my thumb folded between, and they made the fingers go up and down on the thumb. They did this gesture. And I said, what's that? And they said, this penguin told a cold joke, and these 4 are pecking him to death. And
nice.
that was one of my favorites.
One of your proud moments.
Do you know what a dongchim is? Do you know what this is?
No.
Anyone who's watched so Japan and Korea.
Okay.
You know how we give wedgies? They have a different thing. They put their hands together, wrap down their fingers except for their pointer fingers, so that they're forming like this, and then they hit someone from behind in a sensitive area.
Okay.
Right? They call it dongchim. And I told a bad joke, and someone went like this. And for those who are listening, I put an upward motion like this, upwards with my fingers pointed upward. Then I took one hand, and it acted like I was spinning a basketball on my finger. And I said, what's that? And they said, dongching a penguin and spin him on your finger. Is what they told me for how bad the joke was.
Man, okay.
So, I've remembered. I don't know what the joke was I told, but I remember.
But you remember the
how
reaction.
I was told how bad my jokes were. Dongching a penguin and spin him on your finger.
Oh man, when I lived in Mexico, it took forever. I was probably already 2 years in and coming home before I could successfully tell jokes, because the assumption from everyone else was that what I thought was clever wordplay, they just assumed that I was using the words wrong because I was a foreign speaker. And it took a long time to earn the trust to say, no, seriously.
This is an actual
This is funny. This is a pun on purpose.
No, I never got there. The people I'm talking to hang out with Americans, and so they know when we're trying to make a bad joke and humor us, if that makes sense.
Hey, so before we're 13 minutes in, but before we get to our actual topic, do you want to hear a food heist?
I do. It's been a while.
It's been a while, but last week in Monrovia, California, which is right next to Pasadena, the burglar struck again.
Really? Yeah. I'm so excited.
This is actually a return hit.
Okay.
Because 2 weeks ago, the burglar tried to successfully broke into a family's car.
Yep.
Pulled out their groceries and made off with a bag of Oreos.
Yeah, that sounds like the burglar.
Yeah.
Oreos in particular.
Last week,
Send a message.
bear, and I think the article seems to imply it was the same bear. Or no, different bear. A different bear hit the same family's house, broke in, went in through a window, rummaged around in their pantry, took their Oreos once again, and left.
That's the same bear.
Yeah.
They just didn't realize.
It's a bear in a disguise. It's got to be the burglar.
I mean, you don't take the Oreos both times unless you're saying something.
Exactly.
Right? I don't know what that family did, but burglar's sending a message.
Somebody wants to let them know that they know what they did.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, this is 2 weeks in a row. I'm eagerly awaiting this week. Are we going to hear another?
Yeah.
Is the bear going to hit him again?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just have to see.
Well.
And apparently, because the news was interviewing this family's neighbor, and the neighbor said that last year a bear broke into her garage and stole a chocolate cake.
Oh.
So burglars just all over this neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, we know where the burglar has moved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pasadena.
Yeah. Living in Pasadena.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right. So now we actually do have a topic.
Oh.
This is one that I'm very curious to hear your answers for this. My brother sent this to me, and this is a chart that basically shows the trends for several different categories. When do people tend to be nostalgic?
Okay.
So, for example, the first category is close-knit communities.
Okay.
The year at which people are nostalgic, when they fondly remember what they consider the most close-knit community, they tend to be around 7-8 years old.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so there's like 12 or so of those.
So you are nostalgic for the age when you were 7 or 8. It's not a 7 or 8-year-old being nostalgic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And specifically not nostalgic for the age.
Yeah.
And this is what's interesting to me about it because the music category, for example, the music you are most nostalgic for tends to be the music you listen to at a certain point in your life.
Okay, well, that'll be fun. Well, let's start with the age one. For me, I am not nostalgic for the community at 7 or 8.
You don't have is there a specific community that you are very nostalgic for?
My college friend group.
Which makes sense since we're all still hanging out together.
Yep. The things that we would like going to the cons, or going on some road trips with some of my roommates and stuff. Like, I would be nostalgic for that.
Yeah.
Like I am nostalgic for the time that you and Peter and Ben and I went to Corpus Christi, having no idea what we were doing, and
knowing no one.
Yep.
Having no concept of how the industry worked.
Yep.
And just flailing around trying to network. I agree. And for me, I wonder if maybe they are if they mean something slightly different. But also, this is a bell curve, and so they certainly had plenty of answers of early 20s people.
But this is where I'm an outlier.
Yeah. This is the close-knit community that we were part of, that we basically got to build instead of just being thrust into.
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot of the reason that it is important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So,
nostalgic for music. Is it this? Well, next?
The next one is actually the most moral society.
Most moral society.
If you look back on your life and think, when was society at its most moral? When do you think that was?
I don't think
is a hard one to answer.
I don't think it has gotten more or less moral.
Okay. It's just the same?
I think, I think some things we do better with as a society and some things we do worse. And I don't know that I would say, as a general rule, I feel like we do all right. The problem is the internet throws a big wrench into this.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that I'm nostalgic for anything morality-wise in my life.
Yeah.
A time period at all.
This one is interesting because this is maybe the most politically charged category. Like there's another category that is overtly political, but I think this one is the one that is swaying more decisions.
Yeah.
When people can look back and say, oh, things used to be so good, and then this new generation ruined everything.
I think that my parents probably have a strong opinion on that.
Mm-hmm.
I do not.
Yeah.
Do you?
Not really.
Mm-hmm.
What they're marking here is kind of the peak for this graph is, again, around like 8 years old.
Really?
That people are remembering their childhood as a simpler time, regardless of when that time was. And that's interesting. The study makes clear that this is across any age group. You ask a boomer, you ask Gen Z, doesn't matter. They'll all kind of tend to point to, oh, when I was a kid, that's when things were better than they are now.
Yeah.
And I don't actually believe that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you on this. I don't feel like society is decaying the way it is often decried. I don't think we've necessarily gotten better. We've gotten a lot better at some things.
Yep.
And we've gotten worse at some things.
I think the internet has made us worse at some things, but I think as a general rule, we've gotten better.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that one's another outlier for me. I'm kind of a miss on that one. I think I'm going to hit right on the music one. That's why I brought that one up. But let's see what's next.
Okay, the third one, this is the overtly political one. When you look back on a time that had the least political division.
Yeah, I know when that was exactly.
Okay.
It was September 12th, 2001.
Yeah. That's when everybody was all on the same page about stuff.
That's when the candidate who lost the election after a very tumultuous process said, the president is my commander in chief. And like, yep. So for me, that would have been, let's see, age 26. Is that
2001? Yeah.
2001, 75.
And I'm glad that you are specific down to the day because it didn't take more than a week for all the divisions to come back.
It was more than a week, but it wasn't a month.
Yeah. People suddenly, we all agree and we all are standing together, but those other people have the wrong idea about how to respond to this.
I grew up in the 80s. We were super politically divided in the 80s. Right? Like, I can't remember a time when we weren't super politically divided except for that brief moment. What does it say there?
This one puts, let's see, least political division right around 10 or so, 10, 11 years old.
That's just because 10-year-olds aren't paying attention. Like, when I was 10 was middle of Reagan's era, and people were divided during the Reagan era.
People were very divided during the Reagan era. I'm noticing that these graphs are kind of ordered in increasing age. So I'm going to start doing them out of order because otherwise it'll be obvious what I'm talking about. So we'll jump next to music.
Music.
Which period, when you look back on the best music, the time when people were making the best music, how old were you?
16 to 18.
100%.
That
is
was
everybody's.
Be my guess. Yep.
Yeah. Which makes sense. The period of time at which I am most emotionally vulnerable.
And I drive myself, so I set the dial on the radio, and I start having disposable income, so I buy my first albums.
Yeah.
I mean, that just seems very, very clear.
Yeah. You get to break away from your parents' music. And, finally people are making cool music for us.
Here's the thing. I think this is one that's not going to work in the future. Where did my son go? He ran off. There he is. Ollie, do you want to come answer a question? Have you ever listened to do you ever turn on the radio and listen to what's on the radio?
I don't know how.
Yeah, you don't know how.
I seriously don't know.
How do you find music?
Usually from YouTube Music.
YouTube Music. It's what it recommends to you, yeah. So my kids find music in a very different way.
Yeah.
We found music, everyone up to the very current generations found our music by generally turning on the radio, and the top 40s in the genre of our choice would become the best music, right?
Yeah.
Rock, country, R&B, hip hop, whatever it is. Did you?
I also get it from my cousin.
You get it from your cousin,
yeah, which makes sense.
Who gets it from? Spotify recommends, and things like that. And so what we find is, like, my kids aren't necessarily listening to current music. They'll get into something really big, and it's from 12 years ago. And it's just because that's what the algorithm decided that they would enjoy, and it was right, and they latch onto that, and then it gives them other things. And so new music doesn't hit them in the same way as it did previous generations. And I wonder if this question will kind of go out the window eventually.
I think that some of it might still be there. I look at, my kids. My 17-year-old, she is super duper into Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
And that is something that I do think is going to lock into an era, right? Teenage listening to the popular music of the time. Whereas my son, who's a couple years older, he got into 90s grunge. Yeah. My son, who's a couple years younger than her, got into 70s stuff.
And that didn't happen to us.
Yeah.
You didn't listen to 70s music in the 80s as a teenager growing up unless you were a weirdo. And I say weirdo in the nicest way. I mean, really what that means is someone who has actual discerning musical taste and is picking their genres of music based on what they like rather than what's popular. But that's just not what you did.
Yeah. And the internet has given us the ability to curate our own experience in a way that it's never really been possible before. My son can say, I love 70s rock and folk.
Yep.
Please, Alexa, play all of that. And then she'll play it.
My wife would be an outlier here because she spent her childhood not listening to what was popular, but her parents liked because her father was a singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
And so she was trapped in 20 years before. She was 60s music, and that was the best music for her. And she still can't name the bands from our era if I play the music.
Yeah. I'm similar to that.
Yeah.
Not to that degree. But I did kind of grow up listening to the oldies station, which at the time was 50s and 60s.
Yep.
And didn't get into grunge until college in the 90s. So, yeah.
I've mentioned before I lived in Nebraska. Grunge was a little bit...
grunge hit you guys late?
Hit us a little late.
I am sure it hit Utah late, too.
Like, in high school, I was still hair metal. And it wasn't until college for grunge, till 94, 95 for me. So yeah, I was still listening to Van Halen, and I was listening to John Bon Jovi and Guns N' Roses and all of that, Metallica.
Yeah, the first album that I purchased with my own money, which would have been 93 or 94, was Paul Simon's Graceland. So about 10 years behind.
My first was the new Bon Jovi album.
Oh, there you go. Okay, there's another one here that's the best radio. I think we've covered that.
Yep.
How about fashion? This is, obviously people can look at us and tell that we are absolute fashion mavens.
All right, we'll have Adam jump in and cue in on this one. You okay, adding? And you
tell us. Looking back at your life, Adam, when was fashion at its height?
Oh, not the 90s. That's for sure.
How old were you when people were dressing what you consider to be the best?
Today? Honestly.
Today.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a good answer for someone who is fashionable.
That's a very good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't see him, audience, but he does not look like
us.
Golf fashion, maybe?
Yeah. I mean, you are golf fashion, but you always dress nicely, even if it's like casual.
Well, I am married to who I am married to.
That's true. Yes. My sister Jane, who is his wife, was a personal stylist at Nordstrom for a long time. So
yeah. The graph here puts the peak of fashion nostalgia at around 20 years old.
20 years
Which again
old.
Makes sense. Yeah. You've moved out of your parents' house. You're buying your own clothes for maybe the first time in your life.
I mean, I have worn a t-shirt and jeans with something over the top since I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And the thing over the top is only now so I can put my phone in it. In the past, I wouldn't have had that.
Yeah, you just have to have the phone holster.
Yep, I have to have a phone holster.
Giant short-sleeved plaid phone holster.
Yep.
All right. Looking back at your life, and this one's interesting because there's actually two peaks to it. That's fascinating to me. When was the news reporting most reliable? At what point in your life?
Wow. When would I consider news reporting most reliable? You know, it was probably before CNN.
Before the 24-hour news
Before
cycle?
the 24-hour news cycle, right?
Mhm.
If I actually look at it, now I don't think it probably was, but my gut would say whenever CNN was started the year before. When was CNN? When did it first start broadcasting 24-hour news? I remember the event.
So I am on the way far end of the bell curve on this one. I would probably, like, growing up with boomer parents, to me, Walter Cronkite is like the height of trustworthy newsman.
Yeah.
And you know, that was well before my time. So
CNN officially started their 24 hours news channel on June 1980.
June 1980.
Okay.
That's yeah, there's a hype cycle where it hit and people were paying attention to it because it was a little later, but I was going to say 7 or 8.
1986 is when it became popular.
Okay, so that's the one I'm looking at. 11. There is a moment where it hit the public and everyone was paying attention to it. So age 10 is when the news was
10?
most reliable to me.
Okay. So yeah, this puts the first of the 2 bumps.
Mm-hmm.
And now I lost it. I have to find it again. Actually, earlier than that. First of all, this is the one that has the largest pre-birth thing. So I'm not too far off with Walter Cronkite.
Oh, okay. Where you say, it was before I was born.
The edge of the front end of the bell curve is much
totally
larger for this than for most categories.
Mm-hmm. Before I was born, yeah.
The first peak is around, again, 7, 8, 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So that...
Not too far off from where I'm...
And then the second peak is actually around 25, 26 years old.
Okay. Interesting.
And I wonder if that's when people decided that, you know...
To start paying attention to it.
They have their own opinions and they start paying attention.
Yeah.
That could be.
I mean, I did grow up with The Daily Show. And that did influence, right? Like Jon Stewart's back. But in college, like we turned on The Daily Show.
Religiously
with Craig Kilborn even, or was that his name? Or
yeah,
what was
Craig Kilborn had it first.
And then when Jon Stewart came along and it became a real show, we were every night. That's like one of the only things we didn't miss was The Daily Show. And we were right at the target demographic in our 20s at that.
Yeah.
And that would probably be right at around age 25. When did Jon Stewart take over The Daily Show?
We find out.
That would be my second bump.
Yeah, it was late college, early college for us.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, while he's looking that up, looking back over your life, at what point in your life do you feel like we had the best economy?
Strongest economy. Ooh.
He took over on January 11th, 1999.
1999. Yeah.
College.
So,
Perfect.
right at the end of college for me because I graduated in 2000.
Same.
Yeah. And so 99 is 24. So they said 25 is when the bump happens. So
yeah.
That's pretty good. A year into Jon Stewart's reign is, yeah.
That's when we all look back.
And they're like, oh man, but Jon Stewart's back.
Yay!
And he's really funny. So, you asked another one.
Economy.
Economy. When was the economy strongest?
This one feels like a weird question.
No, this is going to be colored by the fact that when my family was doing well, right?
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, my family went bankrupt and lost their house in the mid-late 90s. But, you know, before that, my dad was an executive in a company and doing very well. So I would say when I was 12 or 13,
years old.
Yep. Is when the economy, like in my head, I'm like, wow, things were so good back then.
That is right in line with this.
Yeah. It's like when we bought a new house and we moved into it, and my dad was a big shot executive and he had a cell phone. This is like 87, and my dad had a cell phone.
Had a brick
Had a brick that was in his car.
Nice.
And it was so cool that he had a cell phone. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I'm going to say around the same age for me too. That was when my dad, when I was in college, lost his job. And had to, kind of rebuild his life. But prior to that, kind of 12 through 16 years old, everything was hunky-dory. I'd probably say about the same thing. Plus, we were coming off of the 80s, which was... That was the whole, whether it was true or not, the story we grew up on was that the 80s was the time of big business and lots of money, and everyone was doing great.
And when you were in our demographic, you probably were doing all right.
You probably were.
But then we both crashed in the 90s. So, with my dad, the owner sold the company. The new owners didn't want him, they kept him on as long as they were contractually required to, which was like 2 years. And then he went off and started his own business, and starting your own business is hard and didn't work out. He tried real hard.
Okay, so this is a new graph, and this is maybe the last graph that we'll do of the list. And this one I find interesting because this one has the longest back end of the graph.
Okay.
In terms of people are the most modern with their nostalgia. So what category do you think that might be?
Nostalgic for, and it's most recent. Wow.
When people thought we had the best blank.
The best food.
Exactly.
Is it?
Best food, best cuisine.
Yeah.
Which, I would basically say today.
Yeah.
That we are constantly being exposed to new food cultures.
Yeah.
There's new food fusions that are creating new things that we've never had before.
And as a kid, you don't like good food.
Yeah.
I look at my son.
He was ignoring you completely.
Ignoring me. As a kid, you don't like good food. You like what's familiar. I think it might be like partially instinct, right? Like it exists in us for a reason. Kids don't eat that weird thing. But
They eat Rachel's food.
yeah, you do try things, but then you quietly make mac and cheese cups behind the scenes afterward.
Mac and cheese cups. Is this where you just like put mac and cheese in a cup?
You microwave Kraft mac and cheese, microwavable.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Granted, I will give him. He ate his entire dinner yesterday, but then still wanted a mac and cheese cup later on. This was what happens when you're 11.
Yeah, you gotta you have to carbo load for the next 6 years or more. Awesome. Yeah. So we are right in line, I think, on more than half of these.
Okay, and the other half
there's
were
a few
serious
where
deviations.
we're outliers, but like I said, they are curves, and so we're not off the charts completely on any of them.
So when are people most nostalgic for Ben? Your answer is never.